So one of the questions that we get asked a lot, oh, I can get that carburetor on Amazon for $20. Well, should you be using these carburetors? That's the question. I'm going to show you the answer to that question and then show you, if you're using these carburetors, kind of the things you should do in order to make sure you don't have any problems. So these are just some of the more common ones for snow blowers this time of the year. I'm going to take some of these apart and kind of show you what's going on with all these aftermarket carburetors. So these are various different brands, either bought off Amazon or wherever. I think this one we got from Rotary. There's quite a few different companies that sell them, but there's not a whole lot that make them. So a lot of them are pretty much the same if you get an aftermarket. So we're going to start with the 951-14026A. Probably the most common carburetor out there for a snowblower, or at least used to be. They're using some different ones now. So you've got an intake gasket, that's good. A lot of times these are so thin that they don't even work. You do want to make sure that you have a good intake gasket between your carburetor and your engine, or the adapter, either way. That's the other intake gasket, and then they have one for the front, which on these snowblowers really doesn't do a whole lot because it's already venting back to air. But let's see here. Okay, so everything looks like the original. Huahi usually, Huayi usually has a stamp on the side of these if they're OEM from like MTD or anywhere like that. Just got this battery to kind of give us a nice dark spot. So we're going to open the bowl on these. The quality control is not very good, so many times what will happen is when you open the bowl, you'll actually get some metal shavings in the bottom. So as I'm taking it out, it's kind of hard to see there. There are some metal shavings down in there. So we've got a couple here. Yeah, so let me just run my finger along there. So we got a couple little shinies there too. So it's not a ton in this instance, but a lot of times it is. So now that we've got it apart, you want to make sure that the middle jet is approximately the same size as your other jet. These carburetors are used on a lot of different applications. Sometimes people switch them out. Normally they run okay anyway, but you want to make sure also there's no metal in there. So you basically want to clean these carburetors when you're going to install them, to make sure that the quality control is okay on it. So at that point, that guy didn't look too bad, just a little bit of metal. A lot of times it's a lot worse than that though. So let's grab another one here. Go ahead and wipe all this off. Nice fresh shot. So a lot of these are pretty much exactly the same. They're not the same, but they're similar. The whole body and everything's the same. They just change a little bit on the choke or on the primer bulb or the fuel intake, different directions and things like that, but all basically the same design. So let's take that off. A couple of them there. See what we got. Yeah, I'm not seeing a whole lot in that one either. Both of those are looking pretty good. There are some pieces of black debris there, just on the float, so that's not a good thing. There's a pretty good sliver of metal right there, so that's a good sliver. A lot of times there'll be pretty good sized coils on these things actually, and you'll see a lot of metal in them. You just want to make sure when you're opening up this design that the float, it wants to close right about when it gets to here. It should start to close. It should be fully closed by the time it should be actually spring. The spring should be actuating the needle and seat by the time it's about right here. So as you're pushing it down, by the time it's here, that should be actuating. So this actually needs reset just a little bit. So this little tab here is not far enough up, and a lot of times people will get leaking because of that. It's just a little manufacturing defect. So now as you're going, it starts basically right here is where it starts pushing down. So you've got enough tension on it by the time it's up there that it actually seats your needle down in here. Otherwise, it won't be pushing hard enough and the things will leak over time. Seen it 1,000 times with people installing them. Next year they're leaking, you know, stuff like that. It's because they weren't manufactured correctly to begin with. So again, there's a lot of different numbers. That was a 951-10956. We got a 127-9008. That's one of the Toros. It's pretty much similar, almost exactly the same. Get that metal off the top. Open this thing up. Yeah, so that has metal shavings all over it. There's just metal shavings right there everywhere. So I wiped out all that off, and now there's just metal shavings everywhere all over the place. So those are all little tiny pieces of metal because there's no quality control on any of these. I don't care if it's stamped Huahi or not. A lot of those that are stamped and name brand, they are exactly the same way. You're gonna find those in there. So we've got one more that's kind of this style. This is for like the LCP style. Go ahead and get all that off of there, that metal. Okay, so look at that again. All those little tiny specks of metal, and a lot of times it's bigger. It just depends on, oh wow. Yeah, look at that. Those are all metal chunks there. So that's all metal that's came out of this engine, or out of this carburetor. So if those aren't taken out, that's gonna get sucked up through with your fuel. It's gonna get into your combustion chamber and cause you issues, obviously, with your unit. And if it doesn't cause them immediately, it's gonna at least cause it not to last as long. And it's all because there was no quality control. But as long as you're looking at that while you're in here and cleaning this carburetor and making sure that that's taken care of, is that going to be an issue? Well, no, but on a situation like this, again, it doesn't even start to close the spring until it's at level. So it only has from there to there to actually engage that spring. That's not far enough. That's not spring loaded enough to keep that sealed all the time. As soon as anything gets in there whatsoever, get any varnish at all, it's going to start leaking. That's just what's going to happen. So you actually need to bend that tab again. And there's little quirks like these on every single one of these, depending on what it is or what you're doing. A lot of times you have to make modifications to these things, whether it be the choke or the inlets or anything like that. You've got to make modifications to those in order for those to work correctly for you. So I've got, this is an 801396. So this is for a Toro snowblower. Oh, it looks like this one's already open. But this one, if you're replacing it, we have a video on straightening out the linkage on this, but if you're replacing it with an aftermarket carburetor, there's way too much plastic here. So you actually have to trim that plastic off all the way around in order to get it not to hit the screw sometimes. And that's just on certain models, but it is the case. So we'll get the rest of this metal off of here. That's quite a bit. I don't know that I want to... Got that all off. Let's check it real quick. Yeah, so all that right there, metal, flecks of metal. So we find it in almost every single one we take apart. Sometimes there's an exception and you don't get it. Pretty much all the ones that are that design, I mean, that's a little bit different, but kind of similar to what we're looking at. All the rest of them are, you know, your standard carburetors. Pretty much the same design on the Honda, like the GX 160 and stuff like that. This is a 798917. This is a Briggs & Stratton aftermarket. So it's a little different design. So on something like this, if you're replacing it, we actually have a video on this one, replacing it on a unit because the original one's bad. So the inlet comes out on the opposite side though. So you've actually got to convince that housing to go a little bit further to the right in order to hook up the fuel line. So not a big deal. watch the video if you feel like it or you need help with that. Let's go ahead and take this and see. See what we get in here. So again, modifications to them, very common as I take that out. We got a bunch of brass there that fell. As I throw it down here, we've got just pieces of aluminum all over it. So aluminum, aluminum, aluminum everywhere. Those are all just tiny pieces on there. Came right out. So, oh. So yeah, all those are pieces of just aluminum chunks. I mean, if you're not getting that out of there, it's at the very least gonna cause your engine premature wear. And it could just clog up that jet and cause it not to run just right away also. So let's get what we got next, 632107A. So that's one of the Tecumseh replacement carburetors. Tecumseh's been around for ages. Their carburetors are pretty great. That's funny. The replacement carburetors are pretty great, at least the adjustable that I'll show you next, but it's a little bit different design, kind of like the same on most Tecumsehs, but we'll take the bottom off here. So I'm not seeing anything on that one. A lot of times you don't get much in these, but you do need to make sure that your float bowl is adjusted correctly as in the other ones. You want it to start actuating or be on this, since it's not spring loaded, you want it to be fully in the closed position when it's level. So this one it's doing pretty good. Nothing major there, but again, it does happen quite a bit. So, and then on those, you also want to make sure that your choke is the same as the original. So a lot of times there'll be more or less here, so it'll either be full or it'll have holes in it, and that'll change the way that it starts sometimes for different units. And we've got the 640349. So on this, on this one I just had, I wanted to show you up through here on these. So this one's got the O-ring and the main jet up through. That's fine. That's all fine and dandy. It's a non-adjustable, but those O-rings tend to go bad over time. They do tend to, you know, kind of dry rot out. And then you've got an air leak there, which isn't going to be fixable. So this 640349 with the aftermarket carburetor, I'm not honestly sure how the OEMs are on these, but I do know, so this is the aftermarket that is an adjustable. So if we take it apart, go ahead and get us some clean spot here. So, yeah, so we got definitely some pieces of metal there. I mean, it's not a ton, but they're definitely there. So, all over the place. But on this one, if you look down through, all the way through there, the main jet is actually pressed in to the top as opposed to having an O-ring to seal it. So it goes up and presses through as opposed to be down, as opposed to being down through there and having it seal with an O-ring at the top and the bottom. So in my opinion, that's much better of a design. I mean, that design works great. These are very easy because they adjust. So you can, all you have to do is adjust your main jet here at the bottom by turning the screw in or out. So that's great. But again, still metal shavings. Doesn't matter what the brand, maker, model is, what the carburetor is. I've got one here for, it looks like it's a 119-1980. So that's for a Toro, for their engines. All right, so different design yet. A little bit different. We're gonna get all this other metal off of the top again. Go ahead and open this thing up. Oh yeah, there's a huge chunk right there that just popped out. A bunch of smaller ones over here. So what happens if you didn't take that out? You know, I mean, those are going to get caught in that main jet in the side here, which this one's super tiny. They're going to get caught in there, and then your unit's not going to run right again. And that's after what, a time or two of using it. So that's why no matter what, these carburetors will run perfectly fine for you. They'll do the job, every single one of them. There's no issues with them whatsoever, unless you don't actually do the quality control yourself. So you've got to take the time on each and every one of these, and you've got to do that quality control in order to get them in the position that you want them. So the aftermarket carburetors, they don't provide that for you. I do have a couple others over here I'm going to open up. Now these are Kohler and Honda carburetors. So we've got a couple Kohler carburetors. These are 1485355-S and a 1485368-S. And on these, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So it's same design as everything as those other ones. This is just for a lawnmower, but it's exactly the same design. So I don't get anything out of that one at all. Nothing in the bottom. Go ahead and clear that off. Try the next one. Got a piece there, okay. I didn't get anything in the bottom of that one either. A lot of times that's not the case though. It does not matter that they're OEM carburetors. It still happens. There's still stuff that's missed in the process. So this is a 16100 ZH8 901. This is a Honda carburetor. It's a little bit different design, but still not exactly a whole lot different. You know, I mean, carburetors for all this small stuff are pretty much the same. You know, there's not a whole lot of difference in any of them. So get all that off of there. I've got nothing out of that one either. So that's good. I would say, obviously, you know, as we're showing here, this is a different one, 16100 ZOL-862. As we're showing here, the OEMs, you may have a little less likelihood of it happening. Honestly, I find them in the OEMs quite a bit though. I mean, I check every carburetor that comes through here to make sure that it's going to be good. I am the quality control. So as long as you know that that carburetor is going to be working right, you know that it's going to be running right. So that's the best option. Now I got a little sliver there, and I've got a tiny piece here. Now it's not a lot, don't get me wrong, but it is something. So let's see here, 16100-ZOL-853. So in closing, as we open the last one here, I haven't popped it open quite yet. I'm not sure what happened to the camera there. It said something about overheating, which is kind of strange, but we got a couple pieces of metal there again. And that's in this Honda. So again, not big pieces, just kind of tiny little flecks, but it's not going to do you any favors leaving that stuff in your carburetor. Doesn't matter if it's OEM, whether it's aftermarket, any of that stuff is going to need inspected and quality controlled by any expert out there. Anybody who does this for a living is probably already doing that, and if they're not, well, yeah, it can happen to any of these things. It doesn't, quality controls went out the window, especially the last couple years. So if you're gonna use any kind of aftermarket carburetor, check it well. You know, make sure everything's gonna work right, and you know that thing's gonna run well after that, as long as you know the carburetor's right. So otherwise, you're just gonna run into issues, either A, cause you less life out of your unit, B, cause you right back into the same boat where it won't run because your jet's right back clogged up. You know, it could cause major damage or ruin your engine over trying to save a few bucks on a carburetor. But again, even if you go with an OEM carburetor on any of these, you still want to quality check it because they're still coming in the same way. See it every day. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.